In this last lesson, we'll do something a little bit different. Instead of a series of videos of me lecturing on a topic interspersed with quick questions, it'll feature an extended case study and some open discussion. This video will be the only video segment for this entire lesson. The remainder of the module will feature PDFs, discussion forums, polling questions, and other short exercises. None of this is for grade, it's just for learning. In the previous weeks of this course, we focused on explaining the mechanics of these techniques and tools. You should be comfortable by now with how to formulate and solve optimization models for network design, facility location, combinatorial auctions, and production planning. Optimization is the single most widely used mathematical technique in supply chain management, so hopefully you're comfortable with it by now. You should also be familiar with some of the key financial concepts that you'll be expected to know, such as cash conversion cycle, activity-based costing, and discounted cash flow analysis. Similarly, you should have an appreciation for how companies use different tools to coordinate with their suppliers, their internal manufacturing and production, as well as their customers. But now what I want to do is tie together all of these concepts and methods to focus on the more difficult question of when to use what. We'll be doing this by applying the case study method to a case that I wrote called Chef Yourself. Before we dive into the details of the case, let's talk about what a case actually is. So, case studies are descriptions of real-life situations where a decision needs to be made, usually by a single protagonist. These are typically based on actual business situations, but are usually simplified or modified slightly for both confidentiality and teaching reasons. They are meant to be learning tools. Now, the case study method is widely used in many business schools. In face-to-face classroom settings, it relies on what's known as the Socratic method of teaching. This means that the instructor is there to encourage, guide, and facilitate the discussion between the students who are analyzing the case. Think of it as the opposite of a lecture, where the instructor does all the talking. Obviously, for an online course, I cannot lead a discussion with several thousand of you in real time at one time. So instead, we'll use some of the tools within the platform to encourage discussion and interactions between yourselves. Because again, the real learning of a case comes in the discussion, the interaction with the other people analyzing the case. The objectives here are to, instead of focusing on a single technique or method, they're here to help you learn how to evaluate a problem, how to make decisions in a business setting, and how to present a certain point of view. When we talk about cases, they generally follow a common format. Not all, but the vast majority. There's always an opening section that introduces the protagonist. You'll be making the decision for that person from their perspective, and this is done to better simulate actual decision making. Then there's a background section that provides relevant details on the firm, the industry, the products, the organization, whatever's relevant. After setting the stage, the problem itself is presented, and it's usually framed as a decision that needs to be made. Now, the decision framed might not be the actual one that needs to be made. That's part of the beauty of a case study. You've got to determine what decision you're trying to make. Now, of course, the decision to do nothing is always an option. Once the problem's laid out, a number of alternatives might be presented, or you might need to determine them yourselves. And finally, the conclusion sets any constraints, limitations, and establishes the urgency of the problem. There are many different ways to approach case studies. I encourage you to try and go online and look for some other ones, but here's a simple approach that I recommend. First, give the case a quick read-through. Identify who the decision maker is and what their motivations might be. Try to understand what the actual decision is, why the issue has become important, and why the decision maker is involved at all. Also, try to get a sense of the level of urgency. Once you've done this, dive into some of the details. These are typically found in the exhibits. That's where the numbers live in most cases. Once you have this initial sense of the case, now reread it a little slower, taking notes as you go. Because you now understand a little bit about the lay of the land, you can start developing your potential decisions and testing them against the facts as you reread the case. Finally, you want to summarize and justify the decision that you're making. All right, I think you're ready now to dive into the case, Chef Yourself. It's based on a number of situations I've found in practice, but all the names and numbers have been modified. Now remember, the objective of this exercise is not to relearn how to run different models. We're not going to dive into the different techniques as much. But instead, I want you to learn when they might be used. Try to understand how they fit in to the bigger picture. All right, I hope you have fun with Chef Yourself.